Moore's law states that every 18 months, computers double their power. And as you can see behind us, we've come a long way. But can we take that for granted? And if not, is that such a bad thing anyway? Well, here to help us answer some of those questions is Professor of Computer Sciences, Bernard Chazelle. Hi, Bernard.
Hey, John.
Hey, thanks for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me.
I know you're a busy man. You've just flown in, what, from Germany, is it?
From Germany, yeah. Long flight.
You're doing well. Hey, well, I guess the first question is the rate of computer power doubling every 18 months, is that going to stay the same or not?
So if you ask the experts, they're telling you that this game, we're running at the end of this. Maybe just a few more years because of power dissipation. Basically, the battery in your laptop is the problem. So this law, this so-called Moore's law, almost certainly will end. An interesting anecdote is as Microsoft Windows system, which is the operating system powering most computers, when they design a new version, like Vista was the latest one, they tell you that they have to project what the power of computers will be about 10 years ahead because that's their specifications depend on this. And right now, when they are working on the next generation, the next version of Vista, they are speculating and they're basing their engineering design on the fact that there will not be an increase in power. In other words, that this Moore's law will be dead.
Why was Moore's law so important to computing?
Hi, that's a very good question. The thing about Moore's law, it's a complete miracle. The law predicts a doubling of something, the size of something every 2 years. Any law that predicts the doubling of anything is bound to be wrong. You cannot keep on doubling very long. And this law, which I think was stated in the mid-60s, still holds till today, which is an absolute miracle. It just completely defies gravity. Now, why is it so important? It's because if you ask the question, now, who is behind the miracles of computing, the internet, your iPod, your PDA, and all of that? Now, there will be many actors. Many people will raise their hands and say, me, I did this, I did that. The truth is that it's correct that there are many hands into them. But there's one factor that completely dominates all the others. It's Moore's law. Without Moore's law, there would not have been any of, well, maybe you would have those old computers, but the so-called computer revolution, the web, would not have happened without this law. It's really what has powered computing to this day. And what we're saying now is that this is going to come to an end.
Okay, so it's going to hit the brick wall.
Yes.
So what are we going to do then?
Well, we could jump out the window. That's one possibility.
Yeah.
And now, the people who design computers, then they will go back to an old idea which we had almost abandoned, which is that of parallelism. If one computer cannot go faster, then why don't you use two at once? But buy 5 computers, buy 1 million computers. So we are going back to this, what's called multi-core technology, which is to put lots of computers into, which raises all sorts of issues about it's hard to program these machines and so on. But from where I stand, there's something actually very positive about this, the demise of Moore's law. The negative aspect of Moore's law from a scientific point of view has been to hide really the true nature of hard problems. In some ways you can sort of swipe them under the rug, hide them under the rug, and if somebody says, well, I'd like to do X, but I can't, computer is too slow. Well, people will say, don't worry about it, just wait a year and we'll be able
We'll have the power
to do it. Now, the answer is going to have to be, okay, we have to actually work and understand and solve your problem. We are going to have to be smarter. That's more difficult than just waiting, but it's also much more exciting. And so that's where the concept of the algorithm comes in.
And so the algorithm, you think, is going to be the new way?
Yes.
That's going to turn things on its head. Computers won't be so much more getting powerful, they'll be getting smarter.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
So at the moment, I mean, obviously, I have not the greatest understanding, but I know that an algorithm, to coin a cliche, is like a recipe, isn't it?
Exactly.
So as a literary example, they're going to be used not so much as recipes, but as works of Shakespeare. They're going to get more complicated, more interesting, and more effective.
That's a very good analogy. Yes, everybody knows what an algorithm is because they suffered in school through multiplication
Yes.
division, long division, all that. These are algorithms. They're often the first algorithms people encounter, and they're often the last ones also. They don't want to touch that thing anymore. Of course, algorithms are all around us. Google might be the ultimate example of a company based entirely not on a widget, but on an algorithm. I think the reason why algorithms are going to be more and more important. So to understand that, it's useful to step back a little bit and look at the history of science in the 20th century. And if you look at, 20th century was absolutely an astonishing era for science and engineering. But physics was changed entirely, and the birth of modern biology. And when you ask, well, what allowed all that? Did people become smarter or something? Probably not. But then what you really see is the power of mathematics behind relativity theory, behind quantum mechanics, behind all these amazing theoretical advances, which, by the way, translated into practical, real
Applications.
applications. Yeah, absolutely. What you really have is the power of classical mathematics that more than at any other century. 18th century mathematics was very useful to please noblemen with wonderful ideas about prime numbers and symmetries and so on. And maybe they're a bit useful to build bridges, even that is questionable. But in 20th century, it really just simply exploded in its sheer, awesomeness. Now, in the 21st century, there's a sort of science that has emerged, which is new, which is novel. It's the science of complexity, of what's complex. So if you want to understand economics, for example, and recent months have reminded us, one thing that is sure is that we do not understand economics at all. Social sciences are complex systems. So you look at animals, animal group behavior. These are very interesting, very, very important, interesting questions, which now are moving into the realm of science. But now the question is, what tools do we have to study them? Again, we're not going to be smarter than people 100 years ago. So maybe we have better tools. And now the natural temptation is to say, well, look, in the 20th century, this big revolution in technology and science was propelled by mathematics. So let's just turn back to good old mathematics and try to extract the same tools or new tools from that and just apply them, and you'll see. And that experiment has been tried for at least 2 decades. And I think it's fair to say that it's failing pretty miserably. There are areas, I should be careful, there are areas about large complex systems for which mathematical tools, in particular from statistical physics, statistical mechanics, and so on, have proven to be very useful. And so I should qualify my statement. However, I would say for the overwhelming majority of cases, the current tools we have from mathematics are proving to be completely inadequate. So one has to basically invent a new mathematics. So some people say that algorithms is the new mathematics. Now why algorithms? Why not, religion or something? Why algorithms? So that's where we go back to the recipe thing. If you look at what made mathematics so powerful, you can fill 1 page of a notebook and write down equations. And these equations can explain about 99% of the physical world around you. You put in Newton's, you put in Maxwell's equations, relativity, Schrödinger's equation. There's just a bunch of basic equations in physics and chemistry, maybe cosmology, the standard model, you can put it there. And just look around. I can explain pretty much everything. I can certainly explain the computers, I can explain the lights, I can explain why planes fly, why things explode, why. So now let's go back to these equations. Now these equations, unfortunately, are much too simple. They're much too simplistic. Classical mathematics is a set of tools that was really put together to handle symmetries, to handle situations where there are beautiful symmetries, like think of a hall of mirrors, and you want to understand all these complex reflections and so on. And mathematics really is the right way to handle these questions. And physics is full of symmetries. And so hence the power of mathematics into physics. But when you look at the behavior of economies, ecologies, or animals or humans, interactions, social networks, Facebook and Google and things like this, well, you say on the one hand there are some kind of pseudo-symmetries, but not really. You cannot say, well, this is exactly the mirror image of that. And so the good old equations are just not, they're too coarse. They're not going to do the job. Now, an algorithm can be also thought of as a generalized equation. An equation can be thought of as a small, tiny algorithm, like a haiku or a very short poem or very. But algorithms have no limit to their complexity. You could have, the metaphor would be War and Peace could be viewed as an algorithm. So now the question is, if you have all these added complexity in the modeling, in the algorithm, then maybe now you're putting together the kind of tools that you will need and that will be able to handle all these new sciences that we're talking about. And by handling, I mean to do what most people expect from the science, which is prediction. I'm not sure it would be successful, but what I'm quite sure is that there is no alternative. So I challenge anybody to say, no, there's a third concept out there which has nothing to do with algorithms, and that will be where the solution is. That is not true. So part of the title of my talk has the word flock of birds. And you can look at flock of birds or any social animals. But birds are interesting, or fish or animals, because these are algorithms that they follow algorithms. They're like computers, and they have an algorithm, and they just follow the rules. We don't know for sure what the algorithm is because it's not written on their body. So we have to guess, and probably we make mistakes, but then we make progress. And they follow their algorithm, and they do an amazingly good job at flocking, at flying, at doing
navigating their world and doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
navigation is astonishing.
That algorithm is our word for instinct. We say, well, these things do things on instinct.
Yes.
And in a way, you're saying really that instinct is an algorithm.
That instinct is an algorithm. Absolutely. That has been programmed by millions of years. I mean, in the theory of evolution,
it's writing and rewriting it through evolution.
Absolutely. All the birds who get the wrong algorithm, they die off, and it's a pretty cruel world, but that's the way it is. And so now the question is, if you think that Google is an exciting algorithm, PageRank is the algorithm of Google, wait until you see the flocking algorithm that birds have. That is vastly more interesting. And here's the simple reason why. Google PageRank, the algorithm, was designed by two grad students, maybe 10, 15 years ago or something like that. And now, today the software is getting better. It's written by maybe a few hundreds people for just a few years. But the birds, there are trillions of them, and they've lived for millions of years, and they've all been working at improving their algorithm. And they're not terribly smart, granted, but the sheer number means that these are really crown jewels. That mean the algorithm they follow are so much smarter than anything Google or anybody is ever able to put together. We're much smarter, but just think of the time limitations and the limitations of the number of smart people you can put in a room. So I think it's very important for people who believe in algorithms and who believe in these machines to actually look at nature and the way nature has handled algorithms, which also shows that algorithm is the primary means for nature to do its things.
Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you, John, very much.
Really
I enjoyed it.